The sound of a gentle breeze moves through the trees as the camera pans over a quiet Lagos neighborhood. Kemi, a 27-year-old writer with bright, hopeful eyes, sits on a balcony, typing on a laptop. Her fingers pause as she stares at the horizon, lost in thought. Kemi's best friend, Tola, bursts into the room. "Kemi, you need to come out with me tonight. You've been here for days." Kemi laughs, brushing off Tola's complaints. "I'm working, Tola." "You're hiding," Tola teases, pulling her up. "Come on, we're going to that new lounge." At the lounge, soft music fills the air. Kemi, reluctant at first, relaxes as she sips her drink. Her eyes wander until they meet Eos. He stands across the room, tall and confident, with a kind smile that instantly draws her in. Eo approaches her, his voice warm. "You seem like the type who prefers quiet corners to loud lounges." Kemi smiles. "You guessed right." They talk for hours, sharing laughs and stories. Kemi feels something she hasn't felt in a long time: hope. Over the next few weeks, Eo and Kemi grow closer. They meet for coffee, walks in the park, and long phone calls. Eo is attentive, kind, and makes her feel seen. Kemi is cautious but finds herself falling for him. One evening, as they sit on a bench by the lagoon, Eo gazes at her. "You make my life brighter, Kemi." Her heart races. "You've changed mine too." He leans in and kisses her gently. But as their relationship deepens, Kemi starts noticing inconsistencies. Eo avoids sharing too much about his personal life and becomes distant at odd times. One day, Kemi sees Eo at a supermarket, holding hands with a woman and 2 children. Her world shatters. Confronting Eo, she demands the truth. "I'm married," he admits, his voice filled with regret. "But it's complicated. My marriage has been broken for years." Kemi feels betrayed but also confused. The love she feels for him battles with her sense of right and wrong. Kemi turns to Tola, who is furious. "You need to leave him, Kemi. This isn't who you are." But Kemi can't make the decision so easily. Eo continues to pursue her, apologizing and promising that he loves her. Weeks pass, and Kemi avoids Eo. But her feelings for him linger, pulling her back into his orbit. She starts questioning everything: her values, her desires, and the person she wants to be. One night, Eo shows up at her apartment in the rain. "I need you, Kemi," he pleads. "You need to figure out your life first," she replies, tears streaming down her face. "I can't be your escape." Kemi's emotions are a storm. She buries herself in her writing, trying to find clarity. Her stories begin to mirror her own struggles, filled with characters wrestling with forbidden love and betrayal. Eo's wife, Miriam, discovers the affair. She confronts Kemi, not with anger but with quiet pain. "I don't blame you," Miriam says. "But you need to know the damage this causes." Kemi is devastated. She ends things with Eo, determined to rebuild her life. But the scars remain, and the love she felt for him refuses to fade completely. Months later, Kemi sits in a bookshop, flipping through a novel. Eo walks in. Their eyes meet, and the air is heavy with unspoken words. "Hi," he says softly. "Hi," she replies, her voice steady but distant. The story pauses here, with unresolved tension. Kemi faces a future of healing, self-discovery, and the lingering echoes of a love that changed her life forever. Kemi's hands trembled slightly as she placed the book back on the shelf. The sight of Eo standing there, as if summoned by her thoughts, brought a flood of emotions she had tried so hard to bury. "How have you been?" Eo asked, his tone soft and cautious. Kemi folded her arms, trying to appear indifferent. I've been fine. Moving on. Ao nodded, but his eyes betrayed him. There was still longing there, still an unspoken plea. I've thought about you every day. Kemi turned to leave, unwilling to let herself get pulled back into his orbit. We shouldn't do this, Ao. That night, Kemi lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Seeing Ao had reopened wounds she thought were healing. Memories of their time together flooded her mind, the laughter, the late-night calls, the stolen moments of happiness. Her phone buzzed. A message from Ao. Ao, I'm sorry for everything, Kemi. I know I hurt you, but I meant it when I said I loved you. Kemi's heart ached, but she didn't reply. She couldn't. The next day, Tola dragged Kemi to a wellness retreat in hopes of distracting her. In a serene environment surrounded by nature, Kemi found some clarity. During a journaling session, she poured out her feelings, writing about the love she felt for Ao and the pain of his betrayal. One line stood out: loving him didn't make me weak, but staying in his shadow would keep me small. Meanwhile, Ao wrestled with his own guilt. Miriam had filed for separation, and he was now living alone. Though he didn't regret his feelings for Kemi, he realized the pain his choices had caused everyone involved. One evening, he called Kemi. I know you don't want to hear from me, he began, his voice heavy. But I needed to say that I'm trying to make things right, not to win you back, but because it's what I should have done a long time ago. Kemi stayed silent for a moment. I hope you do, Ao. For your kids, for yourself. But I can't be part of that process. Months turned into a year. Kemi focused on her writing, channeling her emotions into her work. She published a novel that became an instant hit. The story of forbidden love and heartbreak resonated with readers, though they didn't know how much of it was drawn from her life. At the book launch, a man approached her with a copy in hand. Congratulations, Kemi, he said. Kemi turned and froze. It was Ao. He looked different, more grounded. I wanted to see you succeed. This book, it's beautiful. Thank you, she said, her tone polite but guarded. I've been doing a lot of work on myself, Ao continued. I'm not here to complicate your life, I promise. I just wanted to say that I'll always care about you. Kemi smiled faintly, her heart finally at peace. Thank you, Ao. I wish you the best. As he walked away, Kemi felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She realized that love wasn't always about holding on. Sometimes, the greatest act of love was letting go. That night, she wrote in her journal, some secrets are meant to shape us, not define us. And sometimes, love is a chapter, not the whole story. She closed the book and smiled, ready to embrace whatever came next. A few months after her book launch, Kemi found herself busier than ever. Her novel had earned her recognition in the literary world, and invitations for interviews, readings, and panel discussions poured in. Amid the chaos, she felt a sense of pride she hadn't known before. Her pain had birthed something beautiful, and she was finally stepping into the light. At one such event, Kemi met Femi, a fellow author. Femi was charming and down to earth, with a quick wit that made Kemi laugh despite herself. They bonded over their shared love for storytelling and stayed in touch after the event. Your book felt so raw, so real, Femi said during one of their long conversations. I could feel the struggle in your words. Kemi hesitated before responding, that's because it was real. Writing it helped me heal. Femi didn't pry but gave her a look that said he understood. Weeks turned into months, and Kemi and Femi grew closer. He wasn't like Ao, he was open, honest, and never left her questioning his intentions. Slowly, Kemi found herself letting her guard down, allowing someone new into her heart. Tola, ever the supportive friend, noticed the change. "Femi's good for you," she said one evening as they shared a bottle of wine. "I know," Kemi replied. "But part of me is still scared." "Scared of what?" "Of repeating the same mistakes," Kemi admitted. Tola placed a reassuring hand on hers. "You're not the same person you were back then, Kemi. You've grown. Trust yourself." Meanwhile, Eo had completely faded from Kemi's life. Occasionally, she wondered how he was doing, but the memories no longer haunted her. Her focus was on the present, and Femi was becoming a significant part of it. One evening, after a quiet dinner at Femi's apartment, he surprised her with a gift, a leather-bound notebook. "For your next masterpiece," he said with a smile. Kemi opened it to find a note written on the first page: "Here's to new stories, new beginnings, and a love that feels right." Her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Femi." "Thank you for letting me in," he replied, his voice tender. As Kemi walked home that night, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She knew her journey wasn't over, but for the first time, she felt ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. Her life had been shaped by heartbreak, but it didn't define her. She was ready to write the next chapter, not just on the page but in her heart. And this time, it felt like a story worth telling. Weeks turned into seasons, and Kemi's life seemed to bloom in every way. Her relationship with Femi grew stronger, grounded in honesty and shared dreams. They began collaborating on creative projects, blending their voices in ways that felt natural and exciting. One afternoon, Femi proposed the idea of a joint anthology, a collection of stories about second chances. "Your perspective on love and healing is so powerful," Femi said, enthusiasm lighting up his face. "We could create something that inspires people to move forward, no matter how broken they feel." Kemi hesitated, her fingers brushing the edge of her coffee cup. "It's a beautiful idea, but are people really ready to hear more from me about love?" "Absolutely," Femi said. "You don't just write about love, Kemi. You write about growth, about life. That's what people connect with." His words stirred something deep inside her. For the first time, she felt that her pain wasn't a scar to hide but a part of her strength. As they worked on the anthology, Kemi found herself reflecting on the past with a surprising sense of gratitude. Eo had been a painful chapter, but one that had taught her lessons she couldn't ignore. She wrote a short story for the collection, carefully threading her emotions into fictional characters. It was cathartic, a way to close the door on a love that once consumed her. One evening, as Femi and Kemi reviewed their drafts, he looked at her thoughtfully. "Do you ever think about him?" he asked gently. Kemi didn't need to ask who. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But it's different now. It's like looking at an old photograph. The feelings are distant, like they belong to someone else." Femi nodded, his expression unreadable. "I'm glad you found peace." "I am too," she said, reaching for his hand. "And I found something better, a love that's real." Months later, the anthology launched to great acclaim. Readers praised its raw honesty and emotional depth. During the book tour, Kemi and Femi traveled together, presenting their work to audiences who resonated deeply with their stories. In one city, as they signed copies for readers, Kemi spotted a familiar face in the crowd. It was Eo. He approached her slowly, his expression a mix of pride and regret. "Kemi," he said softly, "I've been following your journey. Your writing, it's incredible." "Thank you," Kemi replied, her voice steady but kind. Eo hesitated, then smiled. "I'm happy for you. Truly. You deserve this." Thank you, Ao, she said, meeting his gaze. I hope you're doing well. I am, he said, and for the first time, he looked at peace. That night, as Kemi lay beside Femi in their hotel room, she felt a sense of closure she hadn't expected. The past no longer held her captive, it had simply shaped her into the woman she had become. She turned to Femi, her heart full. Thank you for believing in me, she whispered. Femi smiled, pulling her close. Always. And with that, Kemi closed her eyes, ready for whatever new chapters life would bring. Life for Kemi and Femi settled into a comforting rhythm. They moved into a modest but beautiful apartment together, their days filled with writing, laughter, and shared dreams. The success of their anthology brought new opportunities, literary festivals, interviews, and even a feature in a popular magazine about couples who work together creatively. For the first time in a long while, Kemi felt completely whole. One morning, as the sun filtered through their apartment windows, Femi was pacing nervously while Kemi sat on the couch, sipping tea and eyeing him with amusement. What's with the pacing? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Femi stopped, fidgeting with something in his pocket. I've been thinking about us. About the life we're building. And I realized, he dropped to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. Kemi gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. I realized that you're my home, Kemi, he said, his voice steadied despite his nerves. You're my inspiration, my partner, and the love of my life. I want to spend the rest of my days writing our story together. Will you marry me? Tears welled up in Kemi's eyes as she nodded, unable to speak at first. Yes. Yes, Femi, I will. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and they laughed and cried together, the promise of a new chapter beginning. The news of their engagement spread quickly among friends and family. Tola was ecstatic, declaring herself the unofficial wedding planner. This wedding has to be perfect, Kemi, she insisted. You've been through so much. This is your happy ending. Kemi smiled, but Tola's words lingered. Was this her happy ending? Or just another chapter? As wedding preparations began, Kemi started to feel the weight of everything, her past, her future, and the expectations she had placed on herself. One afternoon, while organizing her old journals, she stumbled upon an entry she had written during her darkest days with Ao. I want to be free, but I don't know how to let go of what feels unfinished. The words hit her like a wave. Even though she had moved on, she realized there was still a part of her that hadn't fully let go of the past. She needed closure, not just with Ao but with herself. A week before the wedding, Kemi made a decision. She reached out to Ao, asking to meet for coffee. When they met, Ao looked surprised but calm. I didn't expect to hear from you, he said. I needed to see you, Kemi said, her tone firm but kind. I'm getting married, Ao. Ao's eyes softened. I heard. Congratulations, Kemi. You deserve this happiness. Thank you, she replied. But I realized I couldn't fully step into this new chapter without saying something first. I forgive you, Ao. For everything. And I forgive myself too. Ao looked down, his expression thoughtful. I'm glad you found peace. You were always stronger than you knew. They talked for a while longer, not about the past but about the lessons they had both learned. When Kemi left, she felt lighter, as though a weight she hadn't noticed had finally been lifted. On her wedding day, as she stood in front of Femi, her heart swelled with love and gratitude. I vow to love you with everything I am, she said, her voice steady and full of conviction. And to build a life with you, one story at a time. Femi smiled, his own eyes glistening with emotion. And I vow to always be your partner, your biggest fan, and your safe place. Kemi knew that her journey had been worth it. The pain, the heartbreak, the lessons, it had all led her here, to a love that was honest and true. And though she knew life would always have its challenges, she felt ready to face them with Femi by her side. This was a new chapter, and it was just beginning. The months after Kemi and Femi's wedding were filled with a deep sense of partnership and growth. They traveled to promote their anthology and took time to explore the world together, drawing inspiration from their adventures. Life felt full, and Kemi often marveled at how far she had come. One day, during a quiet afternoon at their home, Kemi sat at her desk, staring at a blank page. Femi was nearby, working on his latest manuscript. She had been trying to start her next book for weeks but felt stuck. "I don't know what to write," she admitted aloud, her frustration evident. Femi looked up and smiled gently. "You always say the best stories come when you stop overthinking. Write what's in your heart." Kemi sighed but took his advice. She let her mind wander, her pen gliding across the page. That evening, Femi found her still writing, her energy renewed. "What's this?" he asked, glancing at the growing pile of pages. "It's not a novel," she said, grinning. "It's letters. Letters to the woman I was and the woman I'm becoming. It's raw and personal, but I think it might help someone." Femi's smile widened. "That sounds incredible, Kemi. You're always so honest in your work, it's why people love your writing." Over the next few months, Kemi poured her heart into the letters, addressing themes of love, betrayal, healing, and self-discovery. She decided to publish them as a collection titled Letters to My Heart. When the book was released, it struck a chord with readers, especially women who had faced similar struggles. Messages poured in from readers thanking her for her vulnerability and honesty. One message, however, caught her attention. It was from Miriam, Ayo's ex-wife. "Dear Kemi, I read your book, and it moved me deeply. Your journey reminded me of my own, and I want to thank you for sharing your truth. Perhaps one day, we can meet, not as adversaries but as women who have grown stronger through pain." Kemi stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Dear Miriam, thank you for your kind words. I would love to meet someday. Healing is a journey, and I think we both deserve to walk it in peace." Their meeting took place in a quiet cafe. Miriam was poised and graceful, her smile warm but tentative. "I wasn't sure if this was a good idea," Miriam admitted. "Neither was I," Kemi said with a small laugh. "But I think it's important." They talked for hours, sharing their experiences and how they had both grown since their lives had intersected in such a painful way. By the end of their conversation, there was no animosity left, only mutual respect. "I think we both deserved better back then," Miriam said as they parted. Kemi nodded. "And now, we're giving it to ourselves." Life moved on, and Kemi continued to write, her career flourishing. She and Femi began discussing starting a family, excited for the new chapter ahead. One night, as they sat together on their balcony, Femi looked at her with a smile. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" he asked. Kemi leaned against him, her heart full. "Every day. And I can't wait to see where we go next." The stars sparkled above them, a reminder of the infinite possibilities that lay ahead. For Kemi, life wasn't about perfect endings, it was about the courage to keep writing the story.